Welcome to Econ 102, where economist Noah Smith and I make sense of what's happening in the news, technology, business, and beyond through the lens of economics. Let's jump right in.
Well, Nathan, of course, is the host of Cognitive Revolution, and excited to have this mashup double Turpentine host episode today, where we discuss AI and the economy, AI's effect on unemployment. Let's get right into it. So, of course, anytime there's a new technology, people get concerned about unemployment and whether it's the car or any other sort of new technology. People are worried that there'll be mass unemployment, but what ends up happening is humans' wants and needs are seemingly infinite, and new jobs emerge. But some people, and Nathan, I think you're more sympathetic to this take, think, hey, this time is different. So why don't you present your case as to why you think this time is different in terms of AI's potential effect on unemployment?
Sure. Maybe it makes sense just to start with kind of some recent developments in the technology itself and what I see kind of coming online over the next handful of years. And then I do expect a lot of adaptation, certainly. And I'm not one who thinks that we, will necessarily lack for meaning in this future that I see shaping up. But it does seem like a transition that might come at us even faster than any in the past. So here's kind of just a quick rundown of where I think we're at. Today, first of all, we're recording, just 48 hours after the launch of Claude 3. So the state of the art in terms of public facing models has advanced yet again. Today, we basically have AI tools that are better than the average person at a typical task. They are not yet at true expert level for most things, but they're closing in on expert level. And of course, they have very idiosyncratic strengths and weaknesses relative to people. The strengths are like, they're super fast, they're super cheap, they're super responsive. The weaknesses are like, they're very easy to trick. They're not, adversarially robust in all sorts of ways. And, they certainly just have all sorts of crazy quirks and surprises. But it seems like those things are about to get deployed everywhere. And the same techniques are kind of working everywhere. So I think we're headed for a sort of her-style future where the AIs are pretty ubiquitous. They're kind of in your ear all the time. You can talk to them whenever you want. They can do a lot of tasks for you. You can delegate certainly like bite-sized ad hoc tasks to them, freely. And you can also kind of scale up their application if you're willing to put in the elbow grease to automate any number of a super wide variety of tasks, even ones that are pretty idiosyncratic to your context, once you kind of dial in the behavior. So, this seems like it will change how we kind of go through our day, who we spend our time talking to. There's definitely like the personal tutor that's coming. Obviously, discussion often turns to highly regulated industries, but you see the personalized tutor, I think, coming very clearly. The AI doctor and an AI lawyer, probably not too far behind, although there could be a lot of wrangling over exactly how that gets deployed. Definitely, I expect a lot of consumer surplus in these, traditionally expensive areas. So a lot more going forward than in the past. And then at the same time, we're also probably going to get robotics. That'll be a number of years behind the just language-based assistants. But a lot of progress there recently, again, driven by largely the same techniques. And on top of that, we'll have a biotech revolution where we're starting to really model what is happening at the cellular level, in complex systems, and creating all sorts of new insights from that I think will dramatically expand the rate at which we can discover new drugs and do genetic engineering across, various species, perhaps including ours. Certainly we'll have brain-computer interfaces coming before long as well. Neuralink is currently in their early trials, and there's all sorts of research that even shows you can kind of start to do this stuff without invasive methods. So that, also is, I think, a few years off, but like, it's amazing that in 2024, we literally have like decent brain reading technology, and that has hardly even cracked, the public consciousness just because there's so much other stuff going on. So, I think all that, what's crazy in terms of the economy is like, that seems like it's all going to kind of hit over, a pretty densely packed series of waves over a not super long number of years. It seems like it's going to happen like on a shorter time scale than individuals' careers, as opposed to with past economic transformations, even the Industrial Revolution, obviously fast in some sense, but like 3 generations, in another sense. So it sort of was bigger than an individual's career. So I think that, I'm a big believer in the importance of kind of thresholds in my AI analysis generally. Being shorter than individuals' careers, especially if it's like meaningfully shorter than individuals' careers, seems like, and happening kind of everywhere all at once, seems like it could create a much more economically disruptive situation than we're used to seeing. And, again, I think that could be awesome. I'm not one who thinks we're all going to be, bummed out because nobody gets to like, be the customer service support rep, that's on the other end of the phone. That's, that would be a sad state of affairs if we couldn't find better things to do. But I do think we may have a lot of figuring out to do in terms of how we're going to structure society to allow people to kind of pursue their meaning, which I think if they have the sort of basic sustenance that they need, then most people will be perfectly able to do. So, sorry, that was long, but there's my opening characterization.
Vinod Khosla said something like 80% of all jobs in the next 10 years won't will be sort of taken over by AI. Does that ring true to you, or how does that resonate?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, I think 99% of a lot of jobs, I would say. A lot of things are, a great way to think about this is just what is routine and what is not routine. What is routine is increasingly doable by AI. And it may take some elbow grease, to dial in the performance. It may take some investment in kind of new plumbing, just to get the information to the AI at the right time and to, get its output back and to check it. And, there are definitely all sorts of structures that don't yet exist that we'll need to make that happen. But it seems like a lot of jobs where you're doing a routine thing, you could head for kind of 2 nines on that pretty quickly. And then I think it's a lot harder to say in other professions where it's like fundamentally more creative and fundamentally more, I guess just whatever. What's the opposite of routine? Non-routine. Original situations. It's a little less clear how much of those sorts of things will be able to be done by AI. That's probably a little bit more of like the co-pilot, vision of, your real-time thought partner, as opposed to, the full automation. But I think we see both, and it just depends a lot on the particular context.
Noah, what's your perspective? How do you react to this?
So on the technology front, I find it difficult to disagree with anything Nathan is saying. I'm similarly optimistic, and I think I'm optimistic about pretty much most of the same things that Nathan is optimistic about. In fact, if possible, even more optimistic, because I think one thing he didn't even mention was the energy revolution and how, progress slowed down in the 1970s, in part because we stopped using more energy per person because, we didn't really advance beyond the oil age. And now we are the oil and gas age. And now we are, renewable energy in the future. If we get fusion power, we're finding cheaper ways to generate energy. So I think that will allow robots to, robots are not just about control systems. They're also about energy. You need a ton of energy to have little articulated, spiders crawling all over things, cleaning windows and building buildings and whatever you're going to do, or cleaning your house all day. That takes a lot of energy. And I think we're going to get that energy. And that's, I think, another essential piece, along with the biotech revolution, AI. So I think AI, energy, and biotech together are just producing this, and energy being solar and batteries, basically, without even bringing fusion into it, like magic stuff. Like that would just supercharge it even more. I think we're headed for this really amazing age where the confluence of those 3 areas of technology really takes off in a way that I think is probably going to be unprecedented since the confluence of things like, electricity, internal combustion engines. We've seen something like this before. I like the saying that the singularity is in our rearview mirror, because if you look at how people lived in 1870, the way we live now, or the way we lived in 1970 was so far beyond that as to be a unrecognizably different species almost. And so I think we're these three technologies are really bringing us towards something along those lines. I don't know if it'll be bigger, smaller, whatever, but I think it'll be similar. And so I'm similarly optimistic about these technologies. I think where we might differ is that I think about the economic impacts of that in a little bit of a different way. So first, I should say that I think that a lot of the reactions to AI have been fearful, sort of a terror-filled reaction. And I think that if it was in the 1990s, that wouldn't have been the case. I think because in the 1990s, we had much less social unrest recently. And we've had great economic outcomes recently, in the last 10 years, even though this is not necessarily widely appreciated. But before that, we had this time, the 2000s, were this time of like sort of stagnation, inequality. And then we had the Great Recession. And I think that made a lot of people more pessimistic. The value of their houses went down. And people started to fear the future instead of to be brave and optimistic about the future. I think that in the 1990s, people were optimistic and we embraced the internet wholeheartedly. And I think that we would embrace AI and these other technologies wholeheartedly today if we'd had a recent history like the 1990s. But instead, we had all these economic problems. And then we had this decade of social unrest. We had, riots and people screaming at each other on social media 24/7 and, crazy politicians and sort of this fundamental uncertainty about the social fabric of America. I think that put people into a defensive crouch and sort of made people fear the future. I think that we should be more, we should be more optimistic, and that's much harder than just saying we should be more optimistic on podcasts. But I think that the job of people who are optimistic about the economics as well as the technology, like me, need to articulate that and need to sort of convince people that things are going to be optimistic. So with that said, let me try to do a little bit of that. So first of all, I think there's the really, really important idea of comparative advantage. When people think of AI and its effect on people, they usually think of competition first, right? But I always give the example of Mark Andreessen's typing skills. If you've ever seen Mark Andreessen type, it is like a superhero. It's just insanely fast. And I've never seen someone type so fast. Even Dave Peterson. Sorry, Dave, who's types faster. Well, Ryan Peterson's types faster.
Oh, yeah,
Dave is like types faster because he can slightly type faster, but Mark even beats him. Anyway, the point is that Mark hires someone to type for him and me. Why? He's the best at it. Because he has something else to do. He has something more valuable to do. And so, and Mark Andreessen's typist gets paid well, gets a good salary and lives a nice life, and because Mark has something higher value to do, which is just think about venture deals or whatever, like tweet optimistic things on Twitter. But then, or block people. But like what I was saying is that the comparative advantage is this sort of idea that economists are trained to think about from day one. And, most people tend to think about competition in their daily lives. Like, how can I be better relative to someone else's thing? How can I win this math competition? How can I get this job over somebody else? Things like that. How can I be the guy who picks up this girl at the bar instead of this other guy? I don't know. People think about competition, but then comparative advantage, when you think about the whole system and how it shakes out in the end, comparative advantage ends up mattering a lot. And so I tend to start from that sort of idea. This idea that there will be something for human, even if AI were better than humans at every single task that exists, every 100% of all tasks, 0 tasks that humans can do better than AI, 0. And I'm counting robots, everything. And when I say better, I'm talking about at cost. I'm saying AI can do things better and cheaper over the life cycle, including all the fixed costs, than humans on every single task. In a well-functioning economy, humans will still have full employment. And that's a bizarre thing to say. That is a bizarre thing to say. And the reason is because what matters, but it's true. If you have this frictionless, perfectly working economy, that is exactly what happens. If Mark Andreessen is better than, his employees at every single task of running a venture firm, he will still have employees. And the reason is very deep. It's because of relative costs. It's about, there's things that humans are not better than AI at, but are better relative to the things they're really bad at. So we will allocate we will allocate AI, or AI will allocate itself if it chooses, if it's making the decisions. We will allocate AI toward the things that AI is most better than humans at in a relative sense, whereas the things that humans are only a little bit worse than AI at will be things that humans do. And if the presence of AI creates massive wealth, as it should, then, and humans are still the owners of all that wealth, then wealth will, this massive amounts of wealth will still be flowing to humans. So even if we do some stupid little task, like typing for Mark Andreessen, sorry, Mark Andreessen's typist, I apologize for calling your task a stupid little task, but the point is that we'll get paid very well for doing it because there'll be so much wealth. Now that glosses over a lot of things like inequality. Will all the wealth flow to like the owner? Will Jensen Huang and the people at NVIDIA get all the wealth because they control the scarce resource, which is GPUs, compute, right? Or will people who make slightly better foundational models get all the money? Will OpenAI and get all the money? So that's a worry. That's a real worry, and I can't dismiss that one. And also, there's lots of frictions in the economy that mean that it's not as perfectly, frictionless as what I've been describing in this little Econ 101 textbook. We have to go back from Econ 102 all the way to 101. But I'm saying there's a fundamental reason to be optimistic, which is that AI being better than us at stuff doesn't mean that AI will be the one doing the stuff. That's really the key insight here. And I think that once you understand that, once you understand the example of Mark Andreessen's typist, by the way, I got that example from a guy named Greg Mankiw. It's in his intro book. And it's a lawyer in the example. It's a lawyer who's this good at typing. But then I met Mark Andreessen and I found the really good typing. And so anyway, so I didn't make that up. But so that's pretty much the core idea, comparative advantage of why I'm optimistic about humanity's ability, even if we don't exactly know which tasks humans are going to be doing. I think a lot of those tasks will be the same tasks humans are doing now, not because AI won't do them better, but because they'll still be humans' comparative advantage, if not competitive advantage. And I think so people will still be doing a lot of the stuff we do now, even if AI does it better. And so I think that is, now I will say one thing, which is a technical detail here, which is in order for comparative advantage to work, you have to have some sort of aggregate resource constraint. So for example, Mark Andreessen only has 24 hours in a day, right? And so AI has to have some sort of aggregate resource constraint. We can't have infinite compute and energy to throw at things. There must be some limit on how much AI can do. And there is, right? We know that compute is a limit. We know that energy is a limit. We know that those things are in finite supply because compute is physical and because energy is physical. So we know that even if the supply is absolutely vast and enormous, and even if we make rings of computronium, like little processors in little dense belts of processors ringing the sun like a Dyson swarm, even if we do something out of a Charles Strauss book, there's still an aggregate constraint, and that aggregate constraint will mean that comparative advantage will still function, and humans will still do things that they're be hired for huge amounts of money to do things that they are worse than AI at doing. And so then no matter what, that will always happen in a well-functioning market. So I think what we have to worry about are the ways in which the market doesn't function well, and we have to worry about inequality among humans, and we have to worry about unaligned AI. We have to worry about the idea that AI could decide to be like a human but worse. Humans are already pretty bad, but AI could decide to be like us but worse. It could be like Vladimir Putin times 20. It could just decide screw these, meat apes. I don't need them anymore. Blow them up. Skynet, whatever. That's a thing worth worrying about. And that's a thing worth worrying about. And the frictions in the economy and inequality. There's a lot of things worth worrying about. But the idea of if AI can do every task better than humans, humans will have no tasks to do. That's just wrong. And that's just not how economies tend to work. And so I think that's what makes me more optimistic. Anyway, I have lots more to say, but I don't want to rant too long.
Hey there, Erik here. We're looking for sponsors to partner with us on our show. If you or your business might be interested, send us a note at erik@turpentine.co or through our website. That's erik@turpentine.co. If you're a startup founder or executive running a growing business, you know that as you scale, your systems break down and the cracks start to show. If this resonates with you, there are 3 numbers you need to know: 36,000, 25, and 1. 36,000. That's the number of businesses which have upgraded to Netsuite by Oracle. Netsuite is the #1 cloud financial system, streamline accounting, financial management, inventory, HR, and more. 25. Netsuite turns 25 this year. That's 25 years of helping businesses do more with less, close their books in days, not weeks, and drive down costs. One, because your business is one of a kind, so you get a customized solution for all your KPIs in one efficient system with one source of truth. Manage risk, get reliable forecasts, and improve margins. Everything you need all in one place. Right now, download NetSuite's popular KPI checklist, designed to give you consistently excellent performance, absolutely free, at netsuite.com/102. netsuite.com/102 to get your own KPI checklist. netsuite.com/102.
I'm not sure, there's a lot of interesting directions, obviously, to go there. Maybe just on the core point, though, of the comparative advantage, I would like to have a little bit better intuition for this. Maybe a couple different ways we could approach it is, one, like, consider the horse. If I look at the population graph of horses over time, it seems like it's gone down a lot, right? And I am sort of like,
horses
okay,
are slaves.
Well,
Horses
that may be important.
If AI enslaves us, we're fucked. We're in trouble if AI, like I said, Skynet type of thing. If AI enslaves us, takes away our property rights, controls our breeding, and sends us to the meat packers,
yeah, then we have a lot of problems, no doubt.
We're fucked.
But let's rule that out for a second, though, and just say, okay, I'm not sure exactly how best to construct this parallel, but let's maybe not consider human lives, right? Because we can hope for, peaceful coexistence with the AIs, even if they are doing all the, economic production. Or you could also, think of the horse as like maybe not a slave version of a horse, but, what is going to happen to the population of human jobs? Why are there so many fewer horses? It seems like basically we got some other strictly dominant technologies that were just better on all things. And it's like, I don't really see what the constraint is that it ensures that humans would have jobs. And again, I'm not necessarily saying I think we must have jobs or like all is lost, far from it. But, when I try to imagine concrete things, I also have a somewhat hard time just taking into account things like people already seem to prefer AI's empathy and bedside manner in medical interactions. Like, the AI girlfriends are taking off. People are spending hours a day. Young people are spending hours a day on character AI, just largely talking to like AI girlfriends, from what I understand. So, I mean, these things are pretty nascent, of course, but it seems like they're, creativity too, right? Obviously, we've got all this, AI art generation. I think, a beautiful future might be one in which people create art for non-economic reasons, and don't necessarily get paid for it. And there's like a different social structure that ensures that people have, food to eat and access to other resources. But I'm not quite seeing why an individual person should expect to be paid a lot of money to do something, or like what that would be if the AI is actually indeed truly strictly better at it.
Right. So, well, the answer is that, comparative advantage says that we don't have to spend all day thinking of new things that for humans to do to imagine that humans will have jobs, right? We could do many of the things that we do now, even if AI is better than us at them. So we can think all day like, oh, AI is better than this, AI is better than this, AI is better at that, and that could all be true, But comparative advantage says that we will still do many of the things we do today, or we could. We maybe will invent all new tasks for humans to do that we're actually better than AI, maybe. But I think that instead we should think about the case where AI is better than us at literally every task. And when I say better than us, it can do it better for cheaper. So in other words, this is true of Mark Andreessen and the typist, right? If Mark Andreessen can type, he can spend 15 minutes typing, thousands of words, and then his typist can spend, 20 minutes typing only half that number of words. Mark Andreessen can do a better job at cost, right? It's not just that he can do a better job; it's that he can do a better job once you take resource costs into account, right? So he can do a better job at cost, and yet he's still not a typist. That's not his job. And so what I'm saying is that when we ask what kinds of things could humans do, and then we try to imagine things that humans would still be better than AI at, that's not the way to think about it. That's because humans would still be hired very lucratively to do things that AI is better at. And that's the logic of comparative advantage, the thing that we don't have to stretch our brains to imagine what tasks will do. So if AI is better at, you know, if AI is better at being a girlfriend, you know, humans could still be. Oh, I guess people don't get hired for that. That's the thing we do for free. That, by the way, AI girlfriends are very silly. What they should have instead is AI dating coaches to help like people get real girls. Anyway, so that's what they should do. But yeah, so let's think of one of these things like bedside manner, doctors, kind of thing like that. We might still hire humans to do that, even if AI is better at it, right? Because and the reason is because right now AI is pretty cheap because we haven't figured out that many things to use it for. So, you know, and compute is still increasing very fast. We don't use that much of our societal energy and compute on AI yet, right? So we're not bumping up against those aggregate constraints yet. So yeah, maybe now, before we hit those constraints, we could use AI to like replace doctors. But then once we hit the aggregate constraints, maybe it'll just be too expensive to use AI to replace doctors, because even though if you allocated the resources to it, they could do it better than doctors at cost, it's not at cost because AI has more of an opportunity cost, right? Because opportunity cost is cost. And so then the key is that even if AI can do something better than humans for a certain amount of resource cost, that's still not the same as opportunity cost. Because if AI can do all these amazing things, right, then that means that the opportunity cost of a certain unit of compute and energy used for AI is vast and enormous, and which means that using an AI to sit there and counsel a human, to do bedside manner as a doctor's assistant, whatever, or a doctor, like using it to do that, it may be better able to do that for a certain number of ergs of energy, right, or of a certain number of minutes of time, or whatever your absolute cost is. But when you factor in the opportunity cost of what else the AI could be doing, then it makes sense to hire a human to do that, even if AI is better than it. And so you could have this sort of boomerang pattern where for a while, when it's one of the only things we know how to use AI for, we use AI for it, and then humans come back and do it later, right? You can have that, and we've seen things like that. We've seen things like, offshoring of jobs, where then things come back, or we've seen cases of boomerang like that sometimes, because once you hit the aggregate constraints, then things have to shake out, and then but the point is that we don't have to rack our brains thinking, oh, what could humans still do better than AI? Because maybe nothing, and we'll still have plenty to do in a well-functioning economy. And the reason we'll still have plenty to do is because AI, the opportunity cost of having AI do any specific thing is very high when AI is that good. And so, so many of the things that we say, oh, look, AI is better than humans at this, you could still see humans doing that even if the AI is better afterward. Like, yeah. So you see this with, well, anyway, I could go on, but that's the basics of comparative advantage, and I think that logic is essentially absent from the entire discussion on AI and jobs that I see. Once in a while, an economist will mention it. People won't have any idea what the words comparative advantage mean. They'll just transpose that to competitive advantage in their mind and think, but what if AI is better than us at absolutely everything? Yes, if AI is better than us at absolutely everything, we'll still do lots of the things that we will still be hired to do things that AI is better than us at. And I think that's why the negativism, the fear, the pessimism on AI's economic impact on the average person is that's why I'm not pessimistic. I'm worried. I think there's lots of real things to worry about, but I don't think this big one that almost everyone I know in AI and in the tech world and in the regular world worries about, I don't think that's actually a real worry. I think it's different stuff we have to worry about. It's inequality. It's I guess people do worry about unaligned AI, so I think that's a scary thing. But I think that we shouldn't necessarily worry about the fact that humans will just be obsoleted. Now, why are horses different? Well, number one, horses are slaves. They don't get paid a wage, right? Horse breeding, you say, why are there so many fewer horses than there used to be? The answer is because who decides whether a horse gets to have kids? Horse. No, it's humans, right? Human decides whether or not horse has kids. But human also decides whether human has kids. And so if AIs controlled our breeding, AI might decide, well, you know what? We don't need these apes. We're just gonna get rid of them, and then we get rid of them, and then resources, of the planet or whatever aggregate energy, compute wouldn't be flowing to humans. They would be flowing to AI. So that's scary, right? We don't want AI to breed us like animals, I would say. You guys agree? We don't want AI to breed us like animals? I don't. But assuming we still have freedom and control, right? Assuming we're still in control of like how many kids we have and et cetera, there's no reason the human population is going to go down. Now, you could imagine a very extreme inequality scenario for AI where humans get so impoverished that they just start, dying of starvation. There's still lots of jobs for them to do, but they get paid starvation wages and just die. That is technically possible. For, even in a well-functioning market, it's possible for the income of some humans to drop below subsistence level, which at that point we just implement a welfare state, right? We could solve that, right? And of course, I worry that our institutions won't solve that in the right way. I worry that the people in charge of our countries will decide that these people are just dross and we don't need them, and have their self-replicating drone armies just machine gun them into mass graves because they're used. It's like, why should we spend money on the welfare state for these people? But I hope that doesn't happen. And so I think there are big challenges here to manage this. But I think those challenges are more like the challenges we've seen before of governments that don't just slaughter tons of people because they think they're useless, worthless people like, Mao did. Governments that aren't Mao. We need that, right? We need AIs that aren't Skynet, governments that aren't Mao Zedong. And these are problems. I guess we've never had to face the AI Skynet thing before, but we have faced the Mao Zedong problem before. And I think we did ultimately pretty well at removing that, but maybe not as well as we'd hope. Too late for a lot of people. But so I think that those are the challenges that we face, and we are not analogous to horses. No one was trying to say, okay, what could we have horses do now that we don't need them to like pull stuff? People were thinking of that, right? People were thinking like, what could we have horses do? And the horses, but none of the money flowed to the horses, right? Horses just get like your standard daily allotment of grass and apples, right? They still get the same pay that they did before. But if horses could, charge whatever they wanted for their services, it would be a different story. Instead, the money that gets paid to horses all goes to the slave owners of horses, right? It's the people who own the horses legally and physically, own and control the horses that are getting all of the increased wealth that goes toward horses. But if horses controlled themselves, they would have used the horses to produce more horses. If horses controlled themselves, they would have used those extra calories and whatnot and freedom and leisure time or whatever horses would like to get paid in. They would use it to make more horses. I've seen horses doing it. They enjoy it. And so then they would do that, and they would make lots more horses, and then wages, the return to horses, as we found new and different things for horses to do, such as like, entertainment, pull a little fun cart through the street, or, be a pet, or whatever we had horses do. If horses had ownership and control and sentience and all these things, then the money that still goes to horses would have flowed to creating more horses. It didn't. So the key is that we have humans not be enslaved, that we retain, ownership, control, freedom, and all the other things that we value in life already, that we retain those things. That's the key, I think, and that's going to be a challenge because there's a lot of bad humans out there who want to just control and destroy other humans. And then unaligned AI could join them and be even more effective at that. So those are things worth worrying about. But we are not like horses, and it's easy to identify the ways that we're not like horses, and it's easy to imagine the counterfactual in which horses were more like us and they flourished instead of declining in numbers, I think.
So I'm a little confused about the question of like, what wages should a person expect going forward? Because we're like, on the one hand, there's like the possibility, as you noted, that people might be forced into destitution because the wages are just so low. And I'm one who thinks that we really need to get on it when it comes to creating the next version of the social contract with that in mind, whether that's a universal basic income or something, more creative and elaborate than that. it seems to me that, more work is needed now to figure out what that kind of next, social, I guess social contract is the best phrase for it, should be. But on the other hand, you also said, people will get paid super well to do these things, even if an AI can do them better. And so to me, it seems like the key question now is like, should we get on this new social contract, project or not? If we think that, people are going to have high wages by default, then, we don't really need to worry about that. And that seems to sort of often get packaged in with this, like, oh, there'll be new jobs, there'll be new things to do, human wants are unlimited, like there will always be stuff to do, which I do agree that there's always going to be stuff to do, but I don't have a great sense for why there would be high wages and why we wouldn't be in a different regime where it's like, look, you're just not that productive, compared to other options. And so, like, I realize in theory, yes, you get to this like super high opportunity cost, but you also can imagine like a lot of friction, sort of putting us in a place where it's like the AI is better at a lot of things and it's cheaper at a lot of things. It's not immediately repurposable toward like other, super higher and better uses. And so the actual practical choice that like people are really facing is human doctor or AI doctor. And they, maybe pick the AI doctor and the humans, just aren't competitive at like livable wages. So I still don't feel like I have a great sense for why someone should expect high wages and, why we should all be reassured that like, we don't need to work toward a new social contract starting, yesterday.
Right. Okay. So I do agree that, we need a better welfare state. I think that's obvious. But that's true with or without AI. We have the wealth to not allow anyone to starve. So let's just do that. That was true yesterday. So, so the idea about repurposing AI for other stuff is the idea about switching costs and frictions in an economy. And so this is a big deal with humans because it's difficult to just retrain humans for new jobs, right? So people say, oh, these humans can go find something else to do. Well, no, it's hard because then, you're 45 years old and you don't know what else to do. So fine. But AI, I would argue, it's really easy to repurpose the fundamental resources of AI to something else. It's like, it's really just like compute. You can use compute for this model or that model. Like AI, it's hard to imagine a resource that could get repurposed more easily than AI. Like
that's certainly a big part of the appeal. Yes.
Like energy maybe is the only other comparable thing. Right. And so I think that the idea that opportunity cost for AI is going to be a significant thing because it doesn't require, like human style, like retraining, re-education and whatnot, switching frictions and job search frictions and all that bullshit that makes human labor markets pretty frictiony. That AI is going to be much more frictionless because you just say, okay, Geordi, divert compute to the whatever, right? And then that's what happens. Like that's what they do in Star Trek, and that's what we'll be able to do. Right? It's amazing how well Star Trek kind of predicted the AI age. It sort of skipped the entire internet and went right from 60 style like physical technologies to like AI. But anyway, this is cool. But the point is that I know it's hard to wrap our heads around the idea that humans could get paid a good living wage, like not even just a living wage, but a flourishing wage, a high wage, to do things that AI is better in an absolute sense than humans at doing. That's a bizarre concept, and it's hard to wrap our minds around. But it happens, it happens every day. We just don't think about it, right? It happens every day. There's so many things that you, Nathan, are better at than people who get, I assume you make a good high income, so you could think of someone who makes like a medium middle class American income, right? Who you're better than at anything they do. There's nothing that person is better than you at all in terms of job marketable skills. You could operate a backhoe better than them. You could, be an Excel jockey better than them. You could staff a call center better than them. You could do anything. You could be a policeman better than them. You could fight fires better than them. You could do all these things better than them. There's probably, it's easy to imagine a middle-class American out there who, even being a middle-class American making 70K a year or 60K a year, let's say, that's, that person is making more than almost anyone on the planet, right? Given how rich America is, that person's making more than almost anyone on the planet. That person is making that amount of money, getting paid that amount of money to do something that you would be better than them at, like that you, Nathan, would be better than them at. Like thousands and there are millions of employees, maybe hundreds of millions, tens of millions of employees in this country getting paid right now good living, decent, middle-class American wages to do things that you, Nathan, would be better than them at. And the reason you don't do them is the reason you are not in that job instead of them is opportunity cost, because you have something even better to do. You're the AI. You're the AGI. And so you're the NGI, the natural general intelligence that is superior to these other people in every conceivable economic way. I'm not saying that you're better in every other way, like maybe they have a better haircut, although I do like your haircut, but maybe they have a better haircut. I don't care. The point is that in terms of job skills, you're better than them at everything, and yet they're still getting paid a middle-class wage to do something you could do better than them. And that is already happening all over, and it's happening right now. It's happening with us right now in this room, and we just don't see it. But with AI, the same thing will happen. And that's comparative advantage, and we just don't think about it. It just works, and then it's like, man, we've had machine tools doing all this stuff for all this time. We've had the internet doing stuff for all this time. And yes, maybe sometimes inequality goes up and sometimes inequality goes down. But, living standards for like almost all people in the world have just gone up. Right. And so we're still, we think that, okay, well, that's only because we haven't hit this critical threshold where, we still kept finding some things that we were better than the machines at, but we got squeezed into this narrowing range of occupations as the machines became better and better at things. And now they're going to take that last little sliver from us and there'll be nothing we're good at. And that's the fear, right? But it's wrong, because when you look at the tasks that humans do, they're not narrowing. They are diversifying. The number of occupations, as automation technology has progressed, the number of occupations that humans do, the diversity of occupations has expanded radically. The number of different jobs that humans do now is like in 1870, there were like for almost everyone, there was just one job you did. It was farmer, right? And then like after that, there was like, okay, you could be a farmer or a factory worker. It's like, okay, you could be a farmer or a factory worker or one of these boring office workers that pushes stuff from your inbox to your outbox after doing these forms. And so we added tasks, but the number of things you could do 100 years ago was much less than now. It's much more now. Automation technology has been progressing and progressing and progressing, right? General purpose technologies that, automate various tasks, and yet the diversity of tasks that humans do has not been narrowing. So this narrative that we've been compressed into this smaller and smaller space of competence, and then AI will be the last one to finally take this away from us, is wrong, because it thinks about competitive advantage instead of comparative advantage. What's really going on is that comparative advantage still rules, which is why everyone still has a job, and we have all kinds of different jobs. Careers are so diverse now. There's such a blizzard of different things you can do that guidance counselors don't even know what to tell kids in high schools to prepare for anymore. In 1960, you could say, well, you should go into plastics, son, or whatever in that movie. But then like you could say, oh, you could be an accountant. You could do this. And they had these little, back in like the 80s, they'd have like this little list of like standard middle-class jobs you could do. They don't have that anymore, because there's such a incredible diversity of things you can do. And like humans are not being squeezed into a narrowing range of competence. We are doing all kinds of things, and it's amazing. And so that's why I don't buy this narrative that AI is going to take away the last things we're good at, right? Because I don't see last things being a thing. I see humans expanding the range of things we do, even as our capabilities, become automatable. And so I think comparative advantage is really the secret to that. Anyway, so that's the logic there.
I mean, I guess I really wonder, history is full of theories that like worked until they didn't. And I'm I think there's still like
you could imagine the cases in which they didn't work. I don't mean to interrupt, but take Malthusianism, right? It's like this idea that, oh, you get more economic growth, you're just going to breed too many people until you crash, right? That happened again and again and again and again and again, right? For thousands of years until it didn't. But you could go to Malthus and say, Malthus, what if people stopped having quite so many kids? And then Malthus would be, well, okay, things would change. I agree. I understand that my theory would change, but they won't. Everyone's going to always want 5 kids, right? No, it didn't happen. So you could understand why the theory would break. But when I look at comparative advantage in the sense of AI, there's no obvious reason why this theory would break. The horse example doesn't fit. The idea of there's just nothing, the idea that AI is hard to repurpose from one task to another is wrong, because it's much easier than humans to do that. And so, like, I don't see any reason why this theory will break. But
well, if I'm just like a person, a friend's mom recently who I've known since I was 2 years old, just like catching up with her, and she just looked at me hearing what I'm working on, and just stone cold was like, AI creeps me out. I don't want to have anything to do with it. And I think there is a very sort of, plain spoken folk intuition that's like, I don't really know much about the theory you're talking about, but I do know that people in like Dickens, England were out on the street, cold, didn't have food, sleeping in poorhouses. And why did that happen? Shouldn't they have had some comparative advantage? Like, it seems that what really happened there was a disruption happened fast. The looms came online quick, and the weavers were in trouble, and that happened like in a number of places. And the humans couldn't quite adapt, in the time frame that they needed to. Again, it seems to have happened like intra-career as opposed to like over multiple generations. And that does seem really important to me. So if I'm kind of a person now who is, doing any number of jobs that like look like they could soon be fully automated, and I'm like, well, I can imagine getting a lot of different jobs, but all of those look like they could soon be pretty fully automated. And like, I'm not a scientist. I'm not like going to go do something like truly original or unique. Why am I confident that this doesn't, in the absence of like some sort of new social structure, why am I confident that the economy is going to be adaptable enough to make use of me as I am, knowing that I'm not that individually adaptable? Like, I just still feel like that worry, I don't think you've convinced that person, that they don't have anything to worry about. It seems like this is only convincing to the people who really like buy the theory, the people who are, and maybe that's enough, but like the people who, are going to kind of determine how much of this we're going to actually do. And, if there's any sort of limitation here, it would be probably on the kind of social backlash side. If we want to have the upside, it seems like we need to kind of reassure the broader population that like, this really will be good for you. And we could do that with an explicit guarantee, perhaps, but I'm not feeling like, that hypothetical person is likely over the hump to believe that like the economy is going to continue to provide them a good paying job going forward.
Right. Well, so I think there's several pieces of that that I could think about. The first is the general mood of people is negative. And, started out my earlier rant by saying that I think that we just came off this era of social unrest, which came after an era of economic stagnation, inequality. And those two things together have persisted for those persisted for 20 years, right? 20 years is a long time. And, that put people into this defensive crouch. It made them fear the future. Whereas in the 1990s, some people would have still feared the future, but I think fewer, because the recent track record was good. People are just, trend extrapolators. They just they say, oh, well, the change tomorrow is going to be the same as the change yesterday. But it's not. So it's not necessarily. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. We are used to an era where manufacturing jobs got outsourced to China, where unions were becoming less powerful, where big monopoly companies were becoming more powerful, and and business dynamism was declining. We became used to an era of all those things, and on top of all the social unrest and inequality stuff, right? And that when people are scared of new technology, I think we have to take that into account. We have to take into account the fact that whatever technology was doing in the years 2000 through 2020, it wasn't fixing the problems that we had. And if anything, it was just giving us a pocket window full of social media hate where we could watch people scream at and cancel each other all day, right? And so I think that negativity is seeping into negativity about AI. So I think that's part of it. The other part is that I really do think that I guess my message when I have these discussions, and this is of course not the first time I've had this kind of debate. But I think first I try to debunk the notion that humans will be mass unemployed if AI does everything better than we do. I think I've made that case. But then I said, okay, then there's all these other problems we do have to worry about that are maybe not that problem, but they are things we have to worry about. And one of those is the something that economists can like wave their hands at and just say, oh, it's a labor market friction, but it's really important, which is that people are hard to retrain. And suppose we have a period where at first AI replaces the doctors and then human doctors come back in and replace AI once, we hit like compute and energy limits. Well, that's crazy, right? Because that means you're going to have this interregnum, which might last 20 years when doctors, when it doesn't make any sense for people to be doctors. And you're going to take people who spend all this money and time on medical school their whole life, go be like, do some, stupid job for 20 years before we need doctors again. Well, that, and then by that time we'll have closed down all the medical schools. And okay, now it makes sense for humans to be doctors again. We're going to have to retrain them and open all the medical schools, recreate this whole system. So there's these massive frictions that happen that prevent humans from retraining. So even if there's always something that humans could do, right, then it doesn't mean that we'll always be rapid at training them to do that. So that's a big problem that we do have to solve. And I think that focusing on that instead of this mass obsolescence idea is a good idea. And a second issue, which you talked about with weavers, you said looms devastated the incomes of weavers. Well, what do they do to the incomes of like the average Briton or the average person in the world, right? People got money on average, like, there were some people who were hurt, and there will be winners and losers whenever there's a change in the economy. Some people's human capital built up over years will be devalued, right? You could spend your whole life learning to work this one really complex, analog old style machine tool, right? You could be this highly paid, super skilled machinist, and then a cheap 1970s Japanese CNC machine tool comes in and just replaces that machine tool. It's better, right? That doesn't mean that there will be fewer humans operating machine tools, right? And it doesn't mean that humans will be immiserated, or it doesn't even mean manufacturing workers or machinists will be immiserated or even out of a job. But it means you're fucked. It means that, your specific expertise that you spent all these decades building up is now devalued, and you're just a regular schmuck, right? You're just a regular person. And so that is a problem, because there's a whole lot of people, because it creates risk, right? What if I'm the person who the hand of doom lands on? What if I'm the person whose human capital is devalued and who doesn't have anything to do, right? And so that's a thing that a lot of people are rightfully scared of, and it creates risk, because suppose that we create a technology that's going to enrich 99% of people, that's going to increase the income of 99% of people by 10%, right? And then is going to decrease the income of 1% of people by 70%. Well, on average, that still creates income. And not only that, it actually creates economic equality, because the gains are so broad-based, while the harms are concentrated, so that person gets screwed. But then the gains are very widespread, very broad-based. You only have a couple people who lose out, and then you can wave your hand and say, okay, well, they can go on welfare. Well, no, people don't want that, because when you don't know who it's going to be, who is the one person who gets screwed, the one person draws the short straw, that creates risk, and that creates fear, and that creates pressure to slow technology down, even if technology would create broad-based gains. But we do have ways of making a welfare state, right? We can make sure that nobody starves. That's easy. What we can't do is maintain the pattern, the hierarchy of relative positions and statuses in society. We can't do that. We can't say, okay, you were a master weaver, so you're always going to be this much richer than everybody else, even if you get, the power looms are invented. We can't make that assurance, because to make that assurance makes us a sclerotic economy that can't do anything. In fact, if you look at some of the biggest national stagnations in history, the Ming Dynasty or whatever, that refused to import foreign technologies. A big reason they refused to import foreign technologies was because those would disrupt the pattern of who got to be the richest elites in society, right? So the Confucian scholar gentry were like rich and powerful, and they didn't want to make these merchants powerful, right? Or that's why like landed rich people in some European countries were suspicious of Jewish bankers, right? And you got this negative stereotype of the Jewish banker because it's like now finance is on the rise and land is at less of a premium because we opened up the new world or whatever, right? So land is less a premium, finance is more of a premium. So now these like Jewish bankers that we sort of like look down on, like, hey, you're a grubby little banker, you just lend money, you know, I'm gonna make nasty plays about how you're a jerk. You know, that's like, but then suddenly those are the rich guys, and those guys are getting rich, and then you're like, oh, land got devalued because who needs my little manor in like, you know, whatever, like North Germany when like there's just America, and so like these things got devalued, and so I think that created social disruption, social strains and tensions, and there were people fight over relative position. And people worry about risk of losing their privileged, you know, positions. And that I don't have just a push button solution. There's no easy economic solution to that. In fact, there is none. Like economic theory says that this is not a easily. We don't know how to solve that problem, except in very special cases. And so we can make people not starve, but we can't preserve these hierarchies of status that people are used to. We can't, you know, like, and so. Why did the Ming Dynasty and these countries eventually have to open themselves up and accept foreign technology? The answer was war. They were forced to. It was, you know, the countries that had the industrial technology just beat the hell out of them. And then all the local elites went down, who had worked so hard to preserve their position in the Ming Dynasty and the Qing Dynasty and whatever. They all went down, and they went down pretty hard, and they got murdered by angry peasants. And then, you know, they got killed and you know, whatever. But then eventually China got rich. Eventually China got its own industrial elite and got into the industrial technology 100 years late, right? But now it's this industrial champion. And so it got there eventually, but it took a long time and a lot of blood and death and fear and horror and all this traumatic stuff because, you know, simply because the elites, you know, for a long time refused to give up their position by adopting these new technologies. And I think that is a fear. I do fear that like super elite computer programmers are worried that the you know, software engineers will be worried that you know, AI will make any schmuck able to be like a really good software engineer, will devalue their human capital. And so maybe they'll resist it. So we could see like a fight within the tech world. So or high powered lawyers might worry that AI might be a better lawyer than them. You know, I'm not worried that AI is going to be better writer than me, because if AI does get good enough for me to use, I will spam the world with like 1,000x Noah Smith content, and you'll all have to believe everything I say, and then you'll really believe me about comparative advantage after I get AI on my side. But then there's our rant of the week, Erik. It's like, you know, you'll believe me once I get AI arguing for me. But like, but anyway, so yeah, so I think that there are lots of things to worry about. These frictions and these disruptions and this chaos and this, you know, stuff, potential, not just inequality, but changes in inequality. Who gets to be the big dog? Who has to be the underdog, right? That's going to be disruptive. So I'm worried about that too, because in times of disruption, monsters tend to emerge. We get fascism, communism, and, you know, all kinds of scary shit emerges in these big times of disruption. So I am worried. I look over at China. I look at how they've weaponized the internet to basically create digital surveillance and totalitarianism there. And I say, well, okay, what are they going to do when they have AI to like just automate totalitarianism? That's bad. I don't want it. I'm scared of that. So like, I can't say that I'm entirely like just everything's going to be great. I'm not a Penn Glossian. There's all these scary things. I just think we have to sort of recalibrate our fear toward the things that are more priorities to be afraid of. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I think if I had to try to synthesize that and you know, maybe set us up for a future discussion, it seems like we both expect a lot of disruption. The question of whether the equilibrium, you know, the future equilibrium of comparative advantage, the boomerang, whether that happens or not, I think, you know, I might even be with you in that, like, I don't see a reason that the theory doesn't hold in the long-term equilibrium. But obviously, right, you know, we know what famous economists say about the long term.
Yes.
So
in the long term, we're all dead.
So we only have, you know,
except
at least
AI,
for now, our sort of natural human lifespan to worry about, and our rigidities are very much in play. So, I really think a lot is kind of at stake over the next however many years as technology gets better and we kind of start to figure out how to deal with it, and we try to figure out how to tell a story that we can all believe in and that reassures people that are worried. So maybe the future conversation for us is like, on the way to equilibrium, what can we do to grease the wheels of the economy so that we can not block, not have a backlash that blocks all the upside, abundance that we would love to see, but, also kind of reassures or helps people prepare. I mean, there's I just think so many challenges in that in between space. So even if we can see through, to the other side of the eventual equilibrium, I think it's kind of an all hands on deck, and certainly think our leading economical thinkers and economic policymakers should be engaged more and sooner with how do we ease that transition? How do we avoid the sort of nuclear trap where we get, the weapons, but not the power plants, as Thology likes to say. We're definitely getting weaponized drones. The military is going to be doing stuff. So I better at least, get my domestic servant robot as well. And, but I don't think that's something we can take for granted or that we can just say, don't worry about it, everybody. In the long term, the law of comparative advantage will hold. I think we need to develop a more granular program and story for people to really buy into as kind of, a multi-chapter process on the way there. So if you're down, maybe we can unpack that a little bit more next time we get together.
I do. I think that you're exactly right about long-term equilibriums versus short-term disruption. I think that's exactly the right way to put it. And I think that getting people to understand that long-term equilibrium will be pretty good is not necessarily something we can do. The principle of comparative advantage is important because the sort of economic fact that even if AI can do every single thing, every single task better than humans can, still theoretically make a really good living doing things that AI is better than them at. That's an important thing to tell people and for people to understand, but it doesn't solve the problem. You can't just say that, wave a magic wand, and then the problem's solved. Even if people believe it, even if people understand it, because all those disruptions are coming. And so I think that what we need to do is redirect people's worry and sort of redirect them instead of, pen glossingly assuring people that things are going to be okay. I think what we instead need to do is redirect their fear towards totalitarian states. Be afraid of totalitarianism, right? Maybe we can make people afraid of unaligned AI. So far the track record on that hasn't been good. All that happened was an abortive boardroom coup at OpenAI that didn't go anywhere. And maybe, Eliezer Yudkowsky will try doing terrorist attacks on somebody. But that I don't. So I don't know. But it's good for someone to be thinking to make sure that AI doesn't get the nuclear launch codes and that we have biotech security so that AI doesn't create super viruses. But I think that the main thing that humans should be afraid of.
Jobs of the future, kids.
That is jobs of the future, yeah. Jobs of the future, running around preventing AI from bioteching us to death. No, anyway, it's not even necessarily wrong. But okay, what we need people to be afraid of is government. What we need people to be afraid of is totalitarian states. Is because those are the states that won't care if humans become horses. That will allow humans to become horses because it thinks it's better for whatever ruling elite controls China, Russia, whatever totalitarian state, a future America. I don't know. People need to be afraid of that. That's the thing, because those governments will not make the welfare state. Those governments will not let people retain ownership and control over, their own labor and their own fertility. Right? We've seen China control people's fertility. And so I think that should scare us the most, because all of these negative outcomes that you're talking about, these happen very easily in a totalitarian state, but in a democratic, state like ours, it is a lot harder for these things to happen. I just think our fear in the 21st century should be similar to our fear in the 20th century. Our fear should still be like Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. And yes, maybe now we have to add the fear of Hitlerbot or Maobot, Skynet. But maybe we have to add that fear. But the basic fear of the Hitler, Stalins, and Maos of the world remains, and is still like this huge fear. And that's what I want to just refocus people on, because so much of the AI stuff goes bad when you don't have a government committed to solving a lot of these problems. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, it seems a middle way is kind of ultimately what is needed. I always say AI destroys all binaries, and I just note the sort of, on the one hand, it's like government is the thing to be afraid of, and I, certainly don't want to, move to Xi's China. But on the other hand, it's like what you have to be afraid of is governments that don't care about solving that problem. And I think, we are kind of, I'm not sure how great we're doing on that score in the West broadly, right? I mean, certainly governments have like woken up to a degree to the rise of AI. And I would say, they've done probably better than I would have expected. But I'm still like very concerned as to whether our governments are up to the challenge of, kind of bringing this technology online in a way that is broadly positive, is broadly shared, doesn't provoke backlash, doesn't end in the sort of same trap as the nuclear technology has been for decades. And that's basically what I'm trying to contribute to, is some sort of, vision for how can we actually navigate that. And it seems like the extremes are never really the way, as far as I can tell so far.
Yes, and that's almost always true. But okay, but let me say something maybe a little controversial here. When I talk to people in the tech world, which are like most of the people I hang out with, I do not sense I sense almost no optimism about the social effects of the technologies they're creating in terms of AI. Very few. Mark Andreessen is weird. He's not normal. I sense when I talk to AI entrepreneurs, they talk about how many people their thing is going to put out of a job. And they talk about this, and they're not happy about this. A couple are happy. They're like, the French ones are happy. But then no, they're not happy about this. They think that they're doing this economically, the thing that's going to economically harm normal people. I think this attitude comes out of the turbulent 2010s. But it's also a way of people feeling self-important. It's this like, oh, look at this, look how much responsibility I have. Look how much harm I can cause. I am an important person. And I think that's an unhelpful idea for, tech people, we used to have like this World's Fair, right? And in fact, my friend Cam Weiss, who we should have on this podcast, is like setting up a new World's Fair, right? We used to have companies like, DuPont would come out and say like, here's what our chemicals will do for you. Here's how your life will be better, right? I don't see tech people doing this. I see tech people falling in this trap of like just worrying like, oh my God, AI is going to take all the jobs. No, stop. Tell me how AI will make my life better. And there's so many ways. There's so much dumb shit, boring crap work that we have to do during the day that we could do with AI. So much of the hassle in our life. There's so many things that AI could help us with, be a, psychotherapist, or tell us, dating counselor is my favorite thing. AI dating counselors. That's what I want. But then,
I can recommend you a couple apps after the
I don't need it myself. I don't need it. I think, I'm ace, but anyway, so then, no, but like young men do. But young men who are like, I can't get a girl. I'm going to go shoot up a mall. Stop. Ask an AI. And the AI will be like, don't do that. Actually, girls like you. And you just don't realize it because you're autistic. Now, here's what to do. So then that's what they need. And so, there's so many good things. Okay, maybe don't lead with that. All right. But there's so many things that we could lead with. There's so many things that technologists need to tell people how AI is going to improve their lives, and they're not. They're just saying AI is going to take your job. Like, hey guys, look at this thing I'm getting paid to create. It's going to take your job. Want me to still do it? No, that's a bad attitude. Don't do that. Say what will be good about it. Tell people what they'll get. Cars that don't run you over. Take some of the back-breaking, horrible, work that like Amazon warehouse people have to do in like freezing conditions and say, look at that, we'll have a robot do that. And the Amazon warehouse people can like supervise the robot, right? And then talk about that. Talk about the drudgery. Talk about cleaning your house. I'm sitting there, I'm folding laundry. I'm folding my laundry, right? And I love the little, I'm very fast at folding shirts. You just pinch, grab, pinch, flip. You know that method of folding shirts?
I'm familiar.
Yes. So I'm like, oh yeah, I'm so productive. And then thinking, wait, I am like a top economics blogger and I'm working unpaid as a laundry folder. Why? Why is that happening now? Why should that be happening? Is that an efficient use of my remaining few moments of consciousness on this planet? Folding the laundry. Maybe if I have a really good audiobook. But the point is that I would like a robot to do that for me, please. I would like a robot to be able to clean up after my rabbit. A robot that knows how to clean hay and also watch the rabbit to make sure he's like feeling healthy and like not feeling in pain, not having gastrointestinal stasis or whatever, right? Like I need that. There's so many things in life that I need that I don't think about that I need. Tell people. Engineers know the kind of things they invent. Tell people how their lives will be better. Don't just say, I'm going to take all your jobs. You're going to become a horse. Don't do that. Anyway, that's my message, not to you specifically, but to the tech world, who's creating all this stuff on tech podcasts and blogs and however people communicate to the public or just in casual conversation. Like, let's get back that spirit of the 90s. Let's get back that spirit of like, here's what the internet can do for you. Here's what machine tools can do for you. Here's what, a 747 can do for you. Let's get that spirit back. Anyway, there's my speech.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on the positive side of the ledger. I sometimes describe myself these days as a bimodalist, which is to say that I think the age of abundance, is within reach. And I also definitely cannot find a compelling reason to dismiss those that have even the biggest worries, of loss of human control and, all the big picture stuff I would say to me seems in play. But it is striking that there are lots of stories and lots of pieces created of all modalities on the downside. And yet I always kind of say what's in shortest supply today is a positive vision for the future.
Yeah.
So I share your call to arms on that. I've got a podcast actually coming up with a guy named Tim Reutemann, who's a Swiss author of a book called Liquid Rain, which is a future, not utopia, but kind of, definitely as we enter into the age of abundance and have kind of governance reforms to match. And it's a very sort of, doesn't take itself too seriously, near future that, you can actually kind of imagine a way to. But even he has a war in the sort of war that happens between, the present and the future that they kind of look back on as the sort of necessary plot device to like figure out how, everything got kind of shaken up and resettled. So yeah, it is striking how few of those stories we have. And I welcome the challenge and echo the challenge that people need to create a lot more of that.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think we better end there.
Cool. Well, send us your positive visions of the future, folks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Noah. This has been fun.
Thank you. Let's do it again.
Bye for now.
Econ 102 is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Moment of Zen, In the Arena, The Cognitive Revolution, and more. If you like what you hear, subscribe and leave us a review in the App Store. You can keep up with both of our Substacks for written analysis of the topics we cover in the show at noahopinion.substack.com and erictornberg.substack.com. Thanks for listening.